Hey there, thanks for joining us today. We are here to present a case study and how you might use it in a digital marketing or a sport marketing class. It's called A League to Call Their Own, Premier Rugby Sevens, Developing a Digital Strategy to Engage New Fans. I'm Brittany Jacobs, and I'm joined by Brian Wendry. Megan Nocivelli also worked on this case with us and the presentation as well.
All right. Using cases. Yeah, so as many of us know, to give the students some real world experience, it's nice to be able to use these cases and not just keep throwing theory at them. So this case was awesome for us because it was a real world new league forming and offered a lot of great opportunities for the students to investigate.
Like Brian said, this was a brand new sports league. They had their inaugural championship, essentially a pilot event in 2021. And because it was a new league that's only existed for 1 year, students were less inclined to just take old strategies and repurpose them. One of the things that we had seen with our students in terms of digital marketing is that they were notorious for taking things from one league and using them in another, or doing things that the NFL, NHL had already done and just kind of refreshing them. So this really challenged students to think about what can they do with this new league and really build something that hasn't been built before.
Yeah, and it was fantastic because the students obviously do gravitate to the big four, but the world of sport, of course, is a lot bigger and more diverse than simply, the football, the baseball, the basketball, etc. So this allowed them to kind of really, spread their wings a little bit and kind of think in new directions and new ways.
So a bit about the case. Like we said, Premier Rugby Sevens is a new sport league. They're running the league in a Grand Prix model. So if you're used to Premier League lacrosse or anything of that nature, they're having multiple stops in multiple cities around the country, or at least that's their plan. They're doing women's and men's rugby as part of this professional league. They're not separated. Both of these, the women's and the men's events exist together under the Premier Rugby Sevens flag. It is a professional league, so everyone is paid, and there is pay equity between men and women. So while not everyone in the league gets paid the same amount of money, the top tier men and women get paid the same amount. So with that background, the students were essentially challenged to figure out how they could support the CEO and the CMO of this company in developing a new digital strategy. When they were figuring this out, they had some media assets to look at. They had things like logos, a basic Instagram page had been created. There was a basic website, etc. But at that time, the inaugural championship hadn't occurred yet. And even if students are using the case now, only one inaugural championship has taken place. So the world is really wide open for the students to figure out what they want to do and how they can really bring Premier Rugby Sevens into the digital forefront.
Yeah, so this case provided a lot of concepts that the students could consider, depending on, which way they went. The first, of course, is who's the target market, what age group, genders, etc. The challenge in launching a new sports to fans, and also trying to educate them on what rugby is, how to capitalize on new media trends. And that was almost a case study in itself. If we just dive a little bit deeper on that just for a second, we kind of looked at sports betting, fantasy sports, and crypto. We're all familiar with fantasy sports and how well that's worked for the NFL, to drive engagement. Ditto sports betting, right? We see FanDuel and DraftKings out there trying to capture clients and offering, many deals to get you out there gambling. Crypto, right? We have FTX just signed that 19-year deal with the Miami Heat facility. Crypto.com is taking over for the old Staples Center. Tom Brady's doing his thing with TFX, et cetera, et cetera. So there are so many new opportunities with all these new areas that the students could investigate. They did kind of focus mostly on sports betting. That was their area of interest, but clearly there's a lot of other areas they could go into as well. So yeah, so these new concepts and how to differentiate, the rugby product, from the different sports, but a lot of good areas for the students here.
And in addition, there were a lot of theories that were presented within this case, or theories that students should consider as they move through. As Brian mentioned, the idea of market segmentation and creating the appropriate target market. Here we introduced Shilberry et al.'s 2020 market segmentation variables. And this is something that, we found in the teaching notes and that students wouldn't necessarily have access to unless the instructor made sure that they were taught this piece, or, perhaps in part of a lecture before the case, they could be introduced to this. But this is something that students should definitely reference and should look to as they build out their appropriate target market.
Yeah, and so these theories, connecting the real world to the theories here, just kind of shows the progression, the steps they can get to try to attract and educate, people who aren't currently, up to speed with rugby, and just kind of shows the decision-making process here, that goes along with each stage of their education.
And then last but not least, we introduced Mandel and Joshi's 2017 model that is the components of digital marketing. Here you see 7 components, but as Brian mentioned earlier, there are a lot more components to digital marketing in present day than what we see here. The introduction of sports betting, NFTs, crypto, and how those things exist on their own or influence each of these 7 existing spheres.
Yep, so our typical results, kind of, I think we mentioned before, our students thought that the Gen Z were going to be who they're going to target. And sometimes they even went, a little bit younger. They thought they're going to attract like really young fans. The challenge with that is you need older fans now to kind of generate revenue. So our students often, they looked very long-term, which was good, but sometimes, to the detriment of the short term, and actually generating revenue today versus 3 to 5 years from now. Yeah, and they probably didn't think enough about how we're going to educate people about rugby, right? Because a lot of people are not knowledgeable about rugby. So how are we going to onboard all these people and get them up to speed about what a great sport rugby is?
So like Brian said, there's a lot of topics, a lot of content that can be covered using this case. And the way that we utilized it is we used it as part of a case competition. So the students actually went through the whole case in its entirety. It was not broken up into sections. And then they presented their ideas back to a panel of judges. So this case could be integrated into the curriculum using that kind of a model where students present their answers. It could be broken up into multiple sections, perhaps one where they look at target markets and work together to find the appropriate target market, and then from there build to a next section or next segment. And it can also have a really great use when you're looking for socially inclusive learning tools. So because men's and women's equity and parity is at the forefront of this case, it's a really great opportunity to challenge students to consider, why is that not the case in other sports leagues? And why is this one of the first professional sports leagues in the world doing that in 2021? Unfortunately, this isn't live, so we probably aren't going to have any questions right now unless Brian has something for me. But if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Our emails are here, and we would look forward to having those conversations with you. This case will be published in Case Studies for Sport Management, so please use it if you think it would be a good fit for your digital marketing course or for any sport marketing related courses. If you do plan to use it, let us know. We're happy to provide any additional ancillary materials that we have, and kind of let you know a little bit more about how the process went for us. Thanks so much.